John Doe paced back and forth in his apartment, his eyes fixed on the mysterious package sitting on his kitchen table. What could be inside, he muttered to himself. His curiosity piqued. Cautiously, he approached the package, running his fingers along the plain brown wrapping. There was no return address, no indication of who it might be from. "Only one way to find out," he said, taking a deep breath and carefully peeling back the tape. His heart raced as he lifted the lid, revealing a stack of papers inside. John's eyes widened as he flipped through the pages, his brow furrowing with each passing moment. "This is classified information," he breathed, his fingers trembling slightly. John glanced around his apartment, as if expecting someone to burst in at any moment. Who had sent him these documents? And why? "I need to get to the bottom of this," he decided, tucking the papers safely into a drawer. But I'll have to be careful. Whoever's behind this, they don't want these files getting out." He sank into a chair, his mind racing with possibilities. Was he in danger? What did these documents contain that was so sensitive? John knew he couldn't just ignore this. Whatever was going on, he was now a part of it. And he was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. John sat at his kitchen table, the classified documents spread out before him. "Okay, let's see what we've got here," he murmured, his brow furrowed in concentration. As he pored over the pages, a picture began to emerge. This was no ordinary government project. It was something much more sinister. "Project Nightfall," he read aloud, his eyes widening. "Top secret. Experimental weapons. Sarah Winters." John paused, his gaze falling on the name of the project lead. Why did that name sound familiar? Suddenly it clicked. Sarah Winters. She's the head of R&D at Black Hawk Industries. He leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. What was the connection between this classified military project and the defense contractor? "This goes deeper than I thought," John muttered, flipping through the documents again. "If Black Hawk is involved, then there's no telling how far this rabbit hole goes." A knock at the door startled him, and he quickly gathered the papers, shoving them back into the drawer. "Who is it?" he called out, his heart pounding. "It's Sarah Winters," a familiar voice replied. "We need to talk." John stood outside the imposing laboratory, his heart pounding. "This is it," he muttered, gripping the classified documents tightly in his hand. Taking a deep breath, he pushed open the door and stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room for any sign of Sarah Winters. "Sarah," he called out, his voice echoing through the cavernous space. "I know you're in here. We need to talk." A door at the far end of the lab opened, and Sarah emerged, a look of surprise on her face. "John, what are you doing here?" she asked, her brow furrowing. "I think you know why I'm here," John replied, holding up the documents. "These classified files you're involved with. What the hell is Project Nightfall?" Sarah's expression hardened, and she crossed her arms over her chest. "I am not at liberty to discuss the details of that project." "Not at liberty?" John scoffed. "Sarah, this is serious. These files talk about experimental weapons, and your name is all over them. What are you up to?" "I'm doing what's necessary to protect this country," Sarah said, her voice calm but firm. "You have no idea the kind of threats we're facing." "Then enlighten me," John shot back. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're playing with fire. And I'm not going to let you drag me down with you." Sarah's eyes narrowed, and she took a step towards him. "You have no idea what you're up against, John. I suggest you walk away while you still can." John stood his ground, his jaw set. "Not a chance. I'm going to get to the bottom of this, even if it means taking you down." Sarah let out a frustrated sigh. "You're making a mistake, John. But if that's how you want to play it, then so be it. With that, she turned and strode back towards the door, leaving John alone in the lab, his mind racing with questions and doubts. John paced back and forth in Sarah Winter's laboratory, his mind racing. I have to warn her, he muttered, his grip tightening on the classified documents. Just then, Sarah emerged from a side room, her expression guarded. John, she said, her voice cool. I thought I made it clear that I don't want to discuss this project with you. Sarah, listen to me, John said urgently. There's something you need to know, something that's not in those files. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Oh, and what might that be? Damien Blackwood, John said, his eyes narrowing. He's the one behind all of this. Sarah's eyes widened. Damien Blackwood, the CEO of Blackhawk Industries? The very same, John confirmed. These documents may have your name on them, but I'm willing to bet he's the one pulling the strings. Sarah's brow furrowed as she considered this new information. If what you're saying is true, then we're in serious trouble. Exactly, John said, his voice grave. Blackwood is not to be trusted. He's using this project for his own nefarious purposes, and he won't hesitate to eliminate anyone who gets in his way. Sarah's expression hardened. Then we need to act quickly. I'll need to review these documents again, see if there's anything that can help us get ahead of Blackwood. I'm with you, John said, handing over the files. Whatever it takes to stop him. Sarah nodded, her eyes filled with determination. Then, let's get to work. The two of them bent over the documents, their faces set with purpose. Whatever was coming, they would be ready for it. John, Sarah, and Professor Volkov huddled around the table, the classified documents spread out before them. Intrigue. Okay, let's go over what we know, Sarah said, her brow furrowed in concentration. Damien Blackwood is the one behind this whole operation, John chimed in. He's using Project Nightfall to develop some kind of experimental weapon. And based on these schematics, Professor Volkov added, his fingers tracing the pages, it appears to be a highly advanced energy weapon, capable of devastating destruction. We have to stop him, Sarah said, her voice firm. But how? The three of them fell silent, each lost in their own thoughts. I have an idea, John said suddenly, a glint in his eye. What if we could infiltrate Blackhawk Industries and sabotage the weapon's development? Sarah's eyes widened. That's risky, John. Blackwood has eyes and ears everywhere. But it's our best shot, Professor Volkov interjected. If we can disrupt the project at the source, we may be able to buy ourselves some time. Okay, then let's do it, Sarah said, her resolve hardening. But we'll need to be careful. Blackwood won't go down without a fight. Leave that to me, John said, a grim smile on his face. I've got a few tricks up my sleeve. The three of them bent over the documents once more, their heads close together as they hashed out the details of their plan. This is it, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. Our last chance to stop Blackwood before it's too late. John and Professor Volkov nodded in agreement, their expressions resolute. The stage was set. Now they just had to hope their plan would work. The tension in the laboratory was palpable as John, Sarah, and Professor Volkov pored over the final details of their plan. Okay, let's go over this one more time, Sarah said, her voice low and serious. John nodded, his brow furrowed in concentration. I'll infiltrate Blackhawk Industries and plant the virus in their mainframe. That should disrupt the weapon's development. And I'll be here monitoring the situation and providing you with any intel or support you might need. Professor Volkov chimed in, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Meanwhile, I'll be working to sabotage the physical components of the weapon, Sarah said, her eyes narrowing. If we can't stop the project entirely, we'll at least slow it down. Good, John said, his jaw set with determination. The timing has to be perfect. We can't afford any mistakes. We won't make any, Sarah assured him, her hand resting briefly on his arm. We've planned for every contingency. Professor Volkov cleared his throat, drawing their attention. I've secured the necessary equipment and made all the necessary preparations. We're ready to move. John and Sarah exchanged a glance, their eyes filled with a mixture of apprehension and resolve. Then, let's do this, John said, his voice steady. For the sake of the world, we can't fail. The three of them gathered the equipment and made their final checks, their movements efficient and focused. All right, let's go, Sarah said, her hand on the door. Time to take down Damien Blackwood and his twisted plans. John and Professor Volkov nodded in agreement, and the trio stepped out into the night, ready to put their plan into action. John, Sarah, and Professor Volkov stood outside the imposing facility, their eyes scanning the perimeter for any signs of security. All right, let's go over the plan one more time, Sarah said, her voice low and serious. John nodded, his gaze fixed on the building. I'll create a distraction at the front entrance, drawing the guards away. That's when you and Professor Volkov will slip in through the side entrance. And once we're inside, I'll work on disabling the security systems. Professor Volkov added, his fingers twitching with anticipation. Oh, while I sabotage the weapon's components, Sarah finished, her expression grim. We need to move quickly and quietly. Damien Blackwood can't know we're here. Don't worry, I've got this, John said, a hint of a smile on his lips. Just be ready to move on my signal. The others nodded, and John stepped forward, his shoulders squared with determination. Suddenly, a loud explosion rocked the facility, sending plumes of smoke and debris into the air. That's my cue, John shouted, already sprinting towards the commotion. Sarah and Professor Volkov wasted no time, darting towards the side entrance as the guards rushed to investigate the blast. Let's go, Sarah said, her voice tense as they slipped through the door and into the dimly lit hallway beyond. The two of them moved swiftly and silently, their footsteps muffled by the chaos outside. This way, Professor Volkov whispered, leading them towards a bank of elevators. As the door slid open, they stepped inside, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. John ducked behind a stack of crates, narrowly avoiding a hail of gunfire from the security guards. Damn it, he muttered, his heart pounding. They're really not making this easy. Across the facility, Sarah and Professor Volkov were facing their own challenges. The security systems are more advanced than we anticipated, Professor Volkov said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. I'm having trouble overriding them. Keep at it, Sarah replied, her voice tense as she carefully made her way towards the weapon's components. I need those systems down if I'm going to do any real damage. Suddenly, a loud alarm blared, and red lights began flashing throughout the facility. Oh, John said, his eyes widening. I think they've spotted me. He quickly ducked behind another set of crates, his mind racing as he tried to come up with a new plan. Sarah, Volkov, you need to hurry, he said into his calm. I can't hold them off much longer. We're working as fast as we can, Sarah replied, her voice strained. Just hang in there. Professor Volkov let out a triumphant cry. The security systems are down. Great, now let's move, Sarah said, already sprinting towards the weapon's components. John emerged from his hiding spot, his eyes scanning the area for any sign of the guards. "Looks like the cavalry's arrived," he muttered, a grim smile on his face as he joined the others in their mission. John, Sarah, and Professor Volkov moved swiftly through the facility, their footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. "We need to find the heart of this place," Sarah said, her eyes narrowed in concentration. "That's where the real action is going to be." "I'm picking up some unusual energy readings from deeper inside the facility," Professor Volkov chimed in, his brow furrowed as he studied the data on his tablet. "Then that's where we need to go," John replied, his grip tightening on the weapon he had taken from one of the guards. They pressed on, navigating a maze of hallways and security checkpoints, their progress slowed by the occasional encounter with armed guards. "Damn, they're really not making this easy," John muttered, ducking behind a corner as a hail of bullets whizzed past. "We're almost there," Sarah said, her voice calm and steady. "I can feel it." Suddenly, they rounded a corner and found themselves face to face with a massive, heavily fortified door. "This must be it," Professor Volkov said, his eyes widening. "The heart of the facility." John and Sarah exchanged a glance, their expressions grim. "Well, what are we waiting for?" John said, a determined glint in his eye. "Let's do this." With a nod, the three of them moved forward, ready to face whatever lay beyond the imposing door. The massive door slid open, revealing a cavernous chamber filled with a dizzying array of machinery and equipment. "This must be it," Sarah breathed, her eyes scanning the room. "Yes, I can feel the energy emanating from that central structure," Professor Volkov said, his voice low and intense. John gripped his weapon tighter, his gaze sweeping the room for any signs of danger. "All right, let's do this," he said, his jaw set with determination. The trio moved forward, their footsteps echoing in the vast space. Suddenly a booming voice echoed through the chamber. "Well, well, well, if it isn't my old friends John, Sarah, and Professor Volkov." They whirled around to see Damien Blackwood standing on a raised platform, a sinister grin on his face. "I must say I'm impressed you made it this far," he said, his eyes glinting with malice. "But I'm afraid your little adventure ends here." John stepped forward, his weapon raised. "It's over, Blackwood. We're going to shut down your little project for good." Blackwood let out a cold laugh. "Oh, I don't think so. You see, I've been working on something very special." He gestured towards the central structure, and a blinding light began to emanate from it. "The power source for my ultimate weapon," Blackwood said, his voice dripping with triumph. "And you're too late to stop it." John, Sarah, and Professor Volkov braced themselves, their hearts pounding as they prepared to face the ultimate challenge. John, Sarah, and Professor Volkov stood before the pulsing, glowing power source, their expressions grim. "We have to shut this down," Sarah said, her voice tense. "But how?" Professor Volkov asked, his brow furrowed in concentration. "The energy output is off the charts. It'll take more than a simple sabotage to stop it." Damien Blackwood let out a sinister laugh, his eyes gleaming with triumph. "You fools, you're too late. In a matter of minutes, my ultimate weapon will be fully charged and ready to unleash its devastating power." John gripped his weapon tighter, his jaw set with determination. "We're not going to let that happen, Blackwood." "Oh, but you don't have a choice," Blackwood sneered. "Ah, this power source is the key to my victory, and nothing you do can stop it." Sarah's eyes narrowed as she studied the power source, her mind racing. "Wait, I think I have an idea." She turned to Professor Volkov, her expression intense. "Hey, Volkov, Can you overload the system? Cause a feedback loop that will disrupt the power source? The professor's eyes widened, and a grin spread across his face. Yes, I believe I can. But it will be risky. We'll have to time it perfectly. Then let's do it, John said, his voice firm. We're running out of time. The three of them sprang into action, their movements coordinated and precise as they worked to disrupt the power source. The air was thick with tension as John, Sarah, and Professor Volkov worked feverishly to disable the weapon's power source. We're running out of time, Sarah said, her brow furrowed in concentration. I know, John replied, his eyes darting around the room. Blackwood's henchmen will be here any minute. Professor Volkov let out a triumphant cry. I've got it! The power source is destabilizing. Damien Blackwood let out a roar of rage, his face contorted with fury. No, you'll pay for this. Time to go, John said, grabbing Sarah's arm. Volkov, lead the way. The trio sprinted towards the exit, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. There! How? Professor Volkov shouted, pointing to a set of double doors at the far end of the hall. They burst through the doors, only to be met with a hail of gunfire. Damn it, they're already here, Sarah yelled, diving for cover. John and Professor Volkov returned fire, their weapons blazing. We need to find another way out, John said, his voice strained. This way, Professor Volkov called out, gesturing to a side corridor. The trio raced down the hallway, their hearts pounding as they desperately searched for an escape. John, Sarah, and Professor Volkov raced down the dimly lit corridor, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. We need to find a way out of here. Fast, Sarah panted, her eyes darting around for any sign of an exit. This way, Professor Volkov called out, leading them towards a set of double doors at the end of the hall. They burst through the doors, only to be met with a hail of gunfire from Blackwood's henchmen. Damn it, they're right on our tail, John shouted, diving for cover. Sarah and Professor Volkov returned fire, their weapons blazing. We can't keep this up forever, Sarah said, her voice strained. We need to find another way out. John's eyes scanned the room, searching for any possible escape route. There! He exclaimed, pointing to a set of stairs leading up to a catwalk. We can lose them up there. The trio sprinted towards the stairs, their lungs burning as they climbed higher and higher. Suddenly, a loud explosion rocked the facility, sending debris raining down around them. Looks like the power source is really starting to destabilize, Professor Volkov said, his eyes wide with concern. Then we need to get out of here now, John replied, his voice urgent. They reached the catwalk and raced across it, their hearts pounding as they searched for a way out. There, Sarah shouted, pointing to a door at the far end of the catwalk. That's our ticket out of here. The three of them ran towards the door, their footsteps echoing in the chaos of the facility. John, Sarah, and Professor Volkov stood outside the project's facility, their expressions grim. We need to go back in there and finish this, John said, his hands clenched into fists. But Blackwood and his henchmen are still inside, Sarah replied, her brow furrowed with concern. Then we'll have to confront them head on, Professor Volkov said, his voice resolute. The trio exchanged a determined glance, and together they marched back towards the facility. As they approached the entrance, a figure emerged from the shadows. Damien Blackwood himself. Well, if it isn't my old friends, Blackwood sneered, his eyes glinting with malice. Cut the crap, Blackwood, John spat. We know what you're up to, and we're here to stop you. Blackwood let out a cold laugh. Stop me. You fools have no idea what you're up against. Suddenly, a group of armed guards appeared, surrounding the trio. Take them, Blackwood commanded, a twisted smile on his face. John, Sarah, and Professor Volkov braced themselves, their hands reaching for their weapons. "This isn't over, Blackwood," Sarah growled. Her eyes narrowed with determination. "Oh, but it is," Blackwood replied, his voice dripping with confidence. "This is just the beginning." The guards moved in, their weapons raised, as the confrontation reached a fever pitch. The tension in the air was palpable as John, Sarah, and Professor Volkov faced off against Damian Blackwood and his armed associates. "It's over, Blackwood," John said, his voice firm. "We've already disrupted your weapon's power source. It's only a matter of time before the whole facility comes crashing down." Blackwood's eyes narrowed, his expression twisted with rage. "You fools have no idea what you've done. This is just the beginning." "Oh, we know exactly what we've done," Sarah retorted, her hand gripping her weapon tightly. "We've stopped your twisted plans in their tracks." Professor Volkov stepped forward, his gaze unwavering. "And now it's time for you and your associates to face the consequences." Blackwood let out a harsh laugh. "You really think you can stop me? I have resources and connections you can't even begin to fathom." "We'll take our chances," John said, his eyes narrowing. "Now, are you going to come quietly, or do we have to do this the hard way?" Blackwood's expression darkened, and he raised his hand, signaling his guards to open fire. Chaos erupted as the team dove for cover, returning fire with their own weapons. "We need to disable that weapon, now," Sarah shouted, her voice barely audible over the din of the gunfire. John and Professor Volkov nodded, their faces set with determination as they moved towards the facility's entrance. The battle raged on, with both sides refusing to back down, until finally a massive explosion rocked the ground, sending debris and smoke billowing into the air. When the dust settled, Blackwood and his associates were nowhere to be seen, and the facility lay in ruins. John, Sarah, and Professor Volkov stood amidst the chaos, their clothes tattered and their faces etched with exhaustion, but their eyes shone with a newfound resolve. They had won the day, but at what cost? The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: they would never be the same again.